First up, what we're going to do today, we're going to introduce somebody that's very important to this story. It's stilled away for a while for a very good reason. His name is David Fitzgerald. David was intimately involved with this at the very beginning, when the Gosford glyphs were first found, and even before when we think it was first found. I'd like to introduce you now to David.
How do you do?
David, if you could first tell the people listening this, your credentials and your sort of official post at the time the glyphs were first found.
Well, officially I was a building contractor to National Parks and Wildlife Service, Brisbane Water District area. And I spent a lot of my younger life in the hills up around here, just out of curiosity, because I love the bush and the settings and that. And the opportunity came up in the mid-1970s to actually do some construction work for national parks under the then district manager and assistant manager. So a lot of it was called what they call trail definition, erecting signs, and later on we moved on to paving, and then we started building sites where people could platforms build in, and I sort of covered an area from north of the Hawkesbury River up as far as Blacksmiths, which is just the other side of Swansea, so it's a big area.
Okay, so you're involved in basically setting up the sites and finding new sites like that. So how did the Gosford glyphs, how did that first get reported to National Parks and Wildlife? How did that occur?
Well, in the years prior to...
could you actually give a year when this was found too, just to set this?
This is roughly, but it was the late 70s. But
okay.
In several years leading up to it, because I was going to sites that were really hard to come by, and I remember one in particular was up at the old airstrip up the back behind Lisarow, which is...
Mangrove Road.
Yeah, top of Mangrove Road. There was the carvings there were being damaged. There was a riding school close by, and the people hiring the horses were riding over this magnificent carving. So National Parks asked me, could I fence it off? So, and that started this lifelong, from that point on, intrigue with Aboriginal carving. So all the different places I worked, I become the unofficial Aboriginal site spotter. So in a particular area we'd be working, even over here near Bullimore Beach, I'd always go on a hunt for Aboriginal carvings, which I then report back to the district management.
On that site at Mangrove Road was the beginning place.
Okay. Called
Nararan, not Narara, the beginning place. Even people from Darwin have come down to see it. So there you go, thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, to help out, there was a Aboriginal chap I knew to work with young people that were running off the tracks and substance abuse and feeling pretty lonely. So I put a plan to National Parks, because they were always trying to save money, and they allowed me to get involved with this Cecil, who worked with these people at a place called the Glen later on that he established. And so the fellows that actually did the work under the direction of myself and a couple of the people that actually worked directly for me, we taught them woodwork, we taught them the value of doing something, but none of them had ever been exposed to their Aboriginal carving. So I saw it as a win-win for everybody. I was introducing them back to their culture. Yeah. Not that I understood what the carvings meant, but they were doing some hard work and they could stand back at the end of it. And I still have a lot of contact with those fellows. So yeah, I became the unofficial and slightly official Aboriginal site finder.
Okay, so when you first found, or first came upon the Bambara glyphs there, it was in the late 70s, wasn't it?
78, 79.
Can you describe when you first saw it, what state it was in?
Well, first up, I knew there were glyphs in the area.
Yep.
I had been told, and there'd been a little tiny bit in the newspapers. And when I questioned my friends that I work with National Parks, I was told to forget about it. And it came to be that I found some very important Aboriginal carvings in that area up there near Bambara Road. There's only out of one set one complete set, and that's over at West Head. There's a copy of that in the Aboriginal Department of the Australian Museum. There's a plaster cast of it, and I found a matching set, exactly the same. So it was virtually a case of, I went to the, I knew I was used to talk to the district manager. He just wanted nothing to do with these glyphs, so-called at the time. So I spoke to the then acting assistant manager, and I said, well, look, I know the glyphs are up there, and I'm pretty sure you know where they are, but I found some very special Aboriginal sites, so it's a case of you show me yours and I'll show you mine. And so that went on for a few weeks, and I showed her a photo of the glyphs I'd found, the creation, sorry, not glyphs, carvings, the creation carvings. And she thought I got them from West Head, but you can see in the background it wasn't West Head. So they realised I actually knew where there was a set. So after weeks toing and froing backwards and forwards, she told me, look, they're not allowed to mention it, not allowed to take anyone there. But in the end, she said, all right, I'll take you there, but you're not to breathe a word to anybody about it, which is pretty hard not to do. So off we went one evening, and it had to be overnight for some reason. It's very cloak and dagger. And so along with 3 other rangers, myself and I wanted somebody to come with me. They said, no, definitely you and you alone. And what we're going to do first is we're going to go and have look at your heritage carvings, and then we're going to go and see the glyphs. And
so you had to give up yours first?
Yeah, so that led to a heated argument, but on good terms. And I said, well, you show me the area where the glyphs are, and then I'll take you to, and it turned out they're only a kilometre apart in the bush, and which is another funny story, because they're in line with something else. But so anyway, we went back along the trail, took it, went behind a big tree, and looking slightly uphill. It was rough, you couldn't call it a trail, but there's a rough area leading up to a rock face. And I honestly couldn't see anything. All I could see was a rock face, and a lot of rock rubble that collapsed down. It must have been years and years before, because the rubble that had fallen down was completely covered in lichen. And I'd walked past that spot countless times, never realised anything was there, because looking up slightly uphill, all you could see was this rock face with big rocks around it.
So there's no obvious access?
No obvious access.
You couldn't see it?
Not till somebody took you to it.
Yep.
And I immediately, I don't want to use names, but I immediately said to the assistant manager of the National Parks of that district, I said, yeah, you have me on. You really have me on there, because there's nothing there. It's in the dark. It's a rock face. And she said, yeah. And she said, well, come up and have a look. So we walked up. Once we got up there, I realised out of all these tumbled rocks there was actually an opening into it. But you couldn't see it from the track, the walking track. And it was a matter of people with torches. She said, go in first. And it was a matter of, I'm not a particularly large bloke, I'm only average size. And, it was a matter of hands and knees, crawled through this opening that went in horizontally, and all of a sudden it went vertical, went straight up. So it was enough to get your body in there, and then you could stand up inside. And it was probably chest high, so it was a matter of putting your hands on the side and then hauling yourself up. At that time, that opening was full of years of bushfires and trunks of trees, like branches of trees, and rock falls, and so it wasn't, as it's seen now, it's a nice open passageway.
It's all clean now, but what you're saying then was fully covered in debris, which means someone hadn't been there a couple of weeks before and done it. This has been filled up for a long period of time. And as you cleared it away, the glyphs started to reveal themselves?
Well, we could see glyphs.
You could see something to begin with.
Because they reach up, what, 2.5 metres?
Oh, even higher,
Maybe higher, maybe 3 metres. So we could see the upper ones.
Yeah, but not the
lower ones.
Yeah.
So, speaking to the National Parks, and there was a couple of old hands from National Parks. One fellow in particular I've remained friends with. He'd been with National Parks as a park worker. For 28 years at the time, he said, I've never ever struck anything like this before. So he with torches and that, we moved a few branches, and the assistant manager said, look, I don't want anything moved or touched, and she said, I've been told that I've got to close the whole area off. You don't want the public knowing about it. So I worked pretty closely with the actual manager, and I went and saw him and I said, look, I think this is too important to stop people from seeing. And he came up with all sorts of excuses why it had to be shut down, it had to be blanked off. And it was this, I'll call her Belinda, that's not really a name.
That's good, yeah.
I need a name that's similar to that. And she was the acting assistant manager. She felt like I did it. She felt there was something very important about the glyphs. If you imagine the amount of lichen that was growing over, I mean, this sort of stuff doesn't grow overnight or in weeks.
David, can I interrupt for 1 second? I don't like doing that, but it just dawned on me something. When all these people first saw this, nobody was saying, oh, this is a forgery. They were saying, they weren't mentioning those words then, were they?
No, I'm sorry,
they weren't saying it's a forgery.
Oh, no.
No, but they've said that since. But at that time, they weren't mentioning those words, were
they
they?
were all blown away. All the national parks people that accompanied me that night, bar one, had been in there before.
And they were all cognizant of the fact this was something amazing.
That's right.
Right, that's very important because later on the story changes, as you know. And that basically answers my next question, which was, what was your take on these glyphs? You thought, like the rest of them, this is something amazing that you couldn't quite get your head around at the time. Is that right?
Yeah, look, I make no bones about it. I had no idea what the hieroglyphs meant. I no idea at all. I've been at a museum and that, but the next day I went to the library and got all the books I could on glyphs. I always had an interest in Egypt and Egyptology, and I showed her the book. I said, she said, where are we going? I said, we're going to go and see some of these. I don't know what they mean, you might know. And she laughed at me. She thought,
of course she did.
David's crazy again. Take another tablet, you know.
But can I make this point again? We're still talking at this time in the 70s, aren't we? We haven't gone past
78, 78.
Right, very important that.
This was a couple of days. The next day I went and got a book from the library that had hieroglyphs, and then I realised that hieroglyphs lasted well over a period of 3,000 years, and they actually changed in that time. So I really had no chance to become an instant expert.
Well, I'm going to go forward a bit now, off my script of course, and I want to now raise, if I can, you've given us to discuss this before, but we'll get to this in a sec. Let's look at the three things that since after the 70s into the 80s we started to get a new story started to come out as it started to become more popular. Now the first one we've got is in 1982. We have this story which Alan Dash got involved in and others, and it's quite popular and most of the critics use it, of the deranged check in 1982. And there's a second one in 1984 where they claim that Sydney University students were supposed to be involved in this project.
What year was that?
82 and 84. Now I mentioned this to you earlier and you gave us an interesting account of the Sydney Uni students. Would you mind sharing that with everyone? Because the story is that they were supposed to have done it in 84 and forged the whole thing. Could you tell us what really happened?
How that come about, my interest in it saw me talking to people that I thought may know something about it, and they obviously told other people, and so it started to become more and more known. There was a fellow who lived at Edelong, and he used to spend half his year in Egypt, so he was a full-on Egyptologist, and he used to teach part-time at the university in Sydney, and he asked me, was I prepared to take up some of his students? So a handful of his students, when I took them up there, they had a look, they touched nothing, other than had a look through it. Now by now, the rocks had been moved away from, so the opening was quite large.
Yes.
Very easy to spot, very easy to walk through. The debris inside, mainly the tree branches and some of the bigger rocks had been hauled out of the way. So it gave it that clearer appearance. If you look very closely at it, and I had geologists and all sorts of people up there, the northern end of it still has a rock, a layer, very low there. And what you're actually walking on, which now is the floor of the glyphs, is the rest of the roof. It's caved in. There used to be completely roofed over.
So this was completely sealed up all the way along?
That's what we believe. And the reason we believe that, the floor that you're walking on now is exactly the same piece of rock from above, and if you get up on top and move back some of the moss and lichen, you can actually find a groove on either side where the rest of the rock shelving made the roof, but at some stage, for some reason, it had broken and fallen in.
It's the acid rain, David. It's doing it to all our caves. There's caves falling right down. It's called acid rain.
Yeah, well, it is sandstone, so it's you know, it's given to wearing down. It's not granite or anything like that.
So originally, going back a long period of time, this actual whole chamber was sealed off.
Sealed off.
You've got the sheer walls on the side and the roof's like sitting on top of it.
And there's clear enough evidence. You don't have to be Einstein to work out.
So, David, the Sydney Uni students were there. That part is true.
They were
all
there,
the other part that's come out of that.
The thing was, anybody I took up there were not to touch anything. Not to in the unroofed part, but it's more exposed. A lot of the glyphs are starting to wear badly due to the weather. Up where the northern end where the roof is probably almost as good as the day they were made. They were cut. The thing about, if you ever tried carving sandstone, and I had a go at it after I saw it, you need very fine hand, very fine tools, because sandstone being sandstone tends to crumble.
Crumble very quickly, yes.
Some of that carving, they're all very uniform, they're all in line, they're perfectly laid out. Now, it suggested to me somebody did it as a joke, and as far as a European person, we won't use nationalities, but being somewhat deranged, had done it. That's wrong, because I know the people that, although it's in National Park, it was privately owned land, which I think the government's still trying to buy back and protect it, as far as I know. So there was a farm there, and I know a chap who's similar to my age that actually grew up on there, and he used to go past that spot thousands of times and never ever knew that was there. And he still lives in the Gosford area. He never saw it. You would not find it accidentally. Somebody would have to take it there. Now, it's said to me all the way along by, I can't say who, but somebody very close to it, that was the first person we know that actually went in there and found them, other than a fellow was walking his dog along there, the dog shot off chasing something, disappeared into this hole. And the fellow went in and he was calling the dog didn't come out, so he crawled in the hole, and he was the one that actually found it. And that would have been 77, 78, 1977, 1978.
And then when he went in there, would have been all that debris that was in there with him.
He would have only seen, and he would have needed probably a torch. He probably would have found a few glyphs. I'm not sure what he actually found, but I've never found the person to speak to. So.
And David, can I ask you this question, because you've had this knowledge for a period of time, but there was a period, as this started to develop, you walked away from this. Can you explain to people why you actually walked away?
After a number of years trying to work out what it actually meant, and having experts, and then so-called experts, and then all these stories started to come out. Now, I contracted not only for national parks, but the forestry industry, plus the education department. I've generally almost always been in the building and construction field, whether designing or actually building. And it was made pretty obvious to me that I was being painted as a nutcase, and I was in danger of losing my contracts and my work, and that meant my workers. And I was, let's say, very annoyed with some of the rubbish that people were, and they were absolute rubbish. I mean, people were using it. If you want to use something for a seance or some other strange, I believe, strange ceremonies or that, I could be wrong, but I felt the importance of them was so great. You should be in there using them the way you want to use them. They should be left alone. Probably one of the last straws for me was I went up there early one morning, and in the whole eastern wall was virtually covered in candle wax. Somebody been burning candles and setting them again. And to me, that was some form of desecration. Whether they mean anything or whether they don't mean anything is regardless. Somebody went to the trouble to carve them. Now, you wouldn't, as I started to say, you wouldn't, if it was a hoax, because of the position it's in, nobody would have found it. They're beautifully carved, all uniform in size, spacings and that. They're up to almost 3 metres from the ground up. So you would have had to somehow get trestles and possibly ladders in there to climb up and carve these. And you wouldn't, I mean, if you're doing it for a joke or to show people how clever you are, you put them in a place where people would find them.
Graffiti should always be tagged and found. It shouldn't be hidden and untagged. Yeah, definitely. David, there was something else I want to add to this. Very important. Okay, we're going to wind it up now. I want to finish with 2 questions. Number 1, you've mentioned it before, it was a very sacred place. I think we need, if you could make that point again to people, it is a sacred place and should be respected. And we're not getting that at the moment, are we?
No, I don't believe so. I have no particular beliefs about anything, but I think the age of the place, to me, and the way it's laid out, somebody thought it was sacred. So it's up to me as an older person these days to respect that belief and that effort somebody's done. But if you, as I said, I was the official Aboriginal site finder for the national parks. I knew where other Aboriginal carvings were, and if you actually line them up, they actually fall into a grid pattern. Almost at the apex of this triangle is the glyphs, not quite at the apex of it. And they line up with the carvings on West Head, which is across Pittwater, a long way away. They also come back at an angle. There's a place that I've been to many times, and we don't tell many people about it because we don't want people going across and damaging. But it's called the Dreaming Tree, and that's at Bensville. And people, you have to be taken there. Above St Hubert's Island there's a massive set of carvings there. And
Darley's Point.
Yeah, Darley's Point above there.
Darkinjung, Spike and Oak.
I came across that in 1980 when I was working with National Parks. You could actually drive out there. I reported at the National Parks, I took all the photos. They sent people up from the Australian Museum, who I still deal with. We did a cubic metre dig we took out. National Parks put it in their newsletter, and it was a bit of a rough track you could drive out there, and each time I went out there after that I'd find whole families having picnics there, but they were driving their
motorbikes driving over the top.
Yeah, and I actually found people parked on these.
Yeah, on the Darkinjung hats are gone.
And the centrepiece of that is a huge whale. And it's got lines coming out of it. Now, professionally I teach whales about cetaceans, and I run whale watching trips now, and probably you'll notice the shirt I wear, but yeah, and I was disgusted with National Parks, so much so that we had an argument, and I needed a budget to fence that area off, which they didn't have, so I actually removed timber. I went begging to the different building suppliers so I could get enough rails and posts to fence that off. Unfortunately, a lot of damage had already been done by that site now. Yeah. But every year, Nina was up there a few weeks ago. The first weekend in July, we run a whale dreaming festival. So we get up to 8,000 people at that festival each year up at Nora Head precinct. So yeah, that's my story. So
it's a great story. Look, so what we've got here is a sacred site that's ancient. It's been hidden for a long period of time, and here we have gentlemen found it. It was covered in debris before the deranged check, before the Sydney Uni students, before any claim of fakery. And you can also notice, as you said, when it was first found, no one used that word. They knew what it was. And David, thank you very much for that, because it's an important part of this story that's been hidden, and now we've got the truth out. And that's what this is all about.
And the university students couldn't have possibly have recarved it once it had been found years before.
You're the one who took them there. That's the story. That myth we've got about all the things they did, camping there for months on end, is not true.
But in turn, I was taken there by a national parks middle-level manager who did not want them fenced off. And although she was told years time, she used the excuse that the budget didn't quite run to caging it off and moving the rocks. So that's why it was never...
Well, thank heavens for that.
Yeah, so thank heavens for that.
Yeah, and all credit to her for that.
So I didn't find them, I was taken to them.
But you have witnessed them at a time before the fakery begins. That's so important. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Beautiful.
David, you were saying that someone said they were sacred. Were they regarded, with the glyphs regarded as sacred to any Aboriginal people? Did they regard them as sacred?
No. Well, the Aboriginals I were with, they didn't regard them as sacred, but they did regard them as being real. And they couldn't be sacred to them. No. I'm pretty sure Beve will tell you why.
They weren't sacred to us. They were there, and there were stories.
And they were respected.
Yes. And they were respected.
Yeah.
And I believe the story, as Dad told me, of that the old Egyptians sailing here and coming in. And there's also the same type of hieroglyphics up at Barragara Devil's Rock. And you know, the Aboriginals had a sacred language, and it was very much like that. But they don't claim anything to do with the glyphs.
No.
Right?
But
so I believe it was, the story was the old fella told that the two brothers came in, and that was put up there. There's also, I'm told, my elders told me there's a few other places around the coast here where there are Egyptian glyphs, and that would have been due to these brothers, and one died and what have you. They all hold that story. No one's ever said that story not true.
Too. Yeah.
Exactly, that's the story the old people tell.
Now, while we're doing this, could we continue on and go to Aunty Beve now? Can I introduce Aunty Beve?
Yeah.
I need to go and powder my nose.
Look, if I can now introduce Aunty Beve Spiers into our discussion. Aunty Beve is, as far as I'm concerned, the authority. When I came down here, I met her first because I wouldn't come any other way. And Aunty Beve, could you explain your relationship to the land and again the skills and the ceremonies you've been given to the group we're talking to?
Well, my tribal name is Beve, and I'm a Darkinjung woman. And I didn't know that I was Aboriginal, really, until I was about 48. My father's mother was the love child of an Aboriginal warrior from the Siouan tribe, and my great-grandmother, who was Sarah Lilly, but no one would tell us about it. Anyway, my father was an old bushie. He used to run up and down these mountains, and especially Woy Woy Road. There was people who had a big wildflower farm there, which he used to get wildflowers for them and catch snakes for Eric Worrell. I learned to catch snakes when I was 8. But talking about the old, I was talking to Steve here. We always believe, I'm a fully initiated woman, by the way. I'm a law woman and medicine woman. And I was always told by a smack in the face that I was never to ask questions. What was told to me by the elders had to be remembered word for word, a drawing line for line, and I wasn't to get it wrong. And there would come a time when what I was told would come around. And it came around when I was talking to Steve. I don't pretend to understand, because although I've been to university to be a teacher, I had no idea what plates of the earth meant, all of this. But a long time ago, when I was running around for 12 years in the bush with Tom Sales and Percy Haslam, I had to know all these places, all these things to become initiated, and his mother would tell me the women's stuff. Well, there came some very old elders from up north, from Gove and Owenpelly and all up there. And this is a true story. I'm telling it, I don't understand it, I'm telling it how it was told to me. And they came down and they went to the Awa Bakal, they call it a Wabakal, that's a terrible word. Awa Bakal is the name of the tribe, in Newcastle, because they said they were told by their elders, and these people were in their 80s, right, that the beginning place was here. and it was called Nararan. And up the top of a long road there were some beautiful carvings. That now is called Narara. Then when it was time for the young fellas and the young girls to be initiated, they then went through the law. And the first part of the law was called the Oran Belt, which you'll see by any carvings with a line through here. The Oran Belt happened, they had the Bora rings, and they went through that particular part of the initiation where I live at Arimba. And that, the real name for that was Oranvar, the place of the Oran Belt. Then there became, this is what was told to me by these old men and women, then there became too many, and they started to interbreed. And they knew then they had to have the splitting of the tribes. And they went up to the Hunter Valley area to a place called Milberdale. And that's where Boambi is, with his long arms. And he hasn't got a mouth. And he's got 9 strokes under his arms. And he said, I will look after those, the 9 tribes of the Hunter, while ever they respect and look after the law of the Oran Belt, and between his legs was a long tail. It's not a penis, it's a tail. And the law of the kangaroo. And he was of a time when only the birds had the power of speech. And they did, I never did know what they did wrong. I got smacked in the face because I asked. But they did something very wrong. And Cohen, who was the big supreme being of the Darkinjung people, took the power of speech off the birds and gave it to man. But the birds that weren't there, he said, I will allow you to have speech and you will talk, but only through the mouth, the tongue of man. So those birds are the ones that can talk, but they never say anything unless it's what they've been told. And when you see Cohen, K-O-E-I-N, the Supreme Being, he is depicted with a half of a mouth, and with that side he tells the law, and this side he keeps the secrets. And that, when, unlike white man's God, our Supreme Being does 2 things, and so does his wife, Wangina. When she's good and she does the good things, she's Wangina, and when she hands out the bad, she's called Tipakaleen. And Cohen, when he's handing out the good law, his name is Cohen. But when he hands out the bad law, his name is Tipakal. And that's from the Darkinjung people. Now these old people took me up there, and I'd love to take you one day to Milberdale. Unfortunately, for years and years we would not let the Parks and Wildlife put steps up to the cave. And unfortunately after Perce and Tommy had died, and the Awabakal people never ever went out there very much to say anything, the Parks and Wildlife put steps up there, and then came the graffiti. Straight in front of that big cave. I used to take the boys from the jail, from Cessnock Jail and Maitland Jail out there, and I've got pictures of us all there. Well, there's a tree in front of that cave, and the woman's bird, which is like a little woodpecker, it runs vertically up a tree. It runs up and down, and in that cave you'll see 2 perches where the excreta comes down. One, the hawk watches in the day, and of a night time there's another shrike or another hawk, and they're there all the time. Now when anyone goes up to that cave and they haven't smoked themselves, or they shouldn't be there, the little woman's bird screams and carries on, really goes berserk, right? These old people, they said to Awabakal, well, we want to go and see these places. Tom knew where Nararan was, the beginning place, and Perce and Narimba, but the Awabakal people said, oh, we'll take you out to Milberdale. And they took them out, but of course they didn't, these people up there, like I've been going for 16 years, you really see the culture of those people, the bush camp people, because they've never been taken off them. Well, they took them there, and all of a sudden, when the women saw it and no one did any smoking, the women threw their aprons over their head and they took off, right? And so when Tom told them that, they said, we have to go back. So I said to the women, come and we'll go back. And this time, we smoked ourselves down the bottom, and when they saw the woman's bird up and down the tree, they went separately to see that. Now, very unfortunately, there's too many white fellas today that sell things on us, but down the bottom before you get to the cave, you may have seen, you've been to Milberdale, there was a big rock, and it looked like a map, and Tom and Percy used to say, it just looks like a map. It must be something it's got glyphs on it too, and it looked like a map. And so when these people come, Tom said, look, can you come down and show me this? Old Tom's father and grandfather were Featherfoots, so they told him a lot of stuff, but before he ever got told what that rock was, his old great-grandfather died. Anyway, when the men from up there saw it, they got rid of the women, and they said to Tom and Percy, it's pointing the way to men's place. And up behind that rock is, I've never been there because I never go in a men's area. No. Somewhere behind there, I don't know what's there. But when Tom and Percy come back, they were gobsmacked. Wonderful. Now, since then, would you believe somebody sold the rock? No. And the same as out at Wallenby, where my grandmother comes from, out that way, there's an old fella called Snowy somebody or other, and he said there was a big explosion. Big explosion, everything blew up. And I was told about the explosion. Yes. By Tom and Percy, and taken to Gosford, and where they put the second road down from the hill down to Gosford, that was where the big rock was, and on it was this really red ochre with this sort of a mountain thing in the bottom, but this great big explosion. The rock was probably as tall as that black thing over there, and there was this big explosion with probably lava going everywhere, and Tom said to me, whatever you do, make sure you always watch this, don't ever let them take it. But unfortunately, when I was in hospital, and there was also special stuff above the road there, and the council never asked anyone, and Tom was dead, and they just got rid of it. The explosion rock is not there now, but it was, I saw it, and I've got drawings of it.
That explosion, did that come from the earth or did it come from above?
No, it came from the earth, it was going up.
Oh, right.
I think, because that's where it came from. But this is why they said that. This is why I'm saying, I never told this to anybody until you started to say something, and I said, wait a minute, and you said, oh my God. The old people, what they said to me, now I know nothing about scientific stuff. Yeah. This is what the old people said, that long time ago in the dream time there was a big explosion. This was the beginning place. They were all real black hair. This place, not where we're standing here, but Australia here. Yeah. This was the beginning place, right? And when this big explosion came, and he mentioned 8. Now I still don't know whether there was 8 or not, but he said the 8 plates of the earth, of the land, shifted and went in all directions. He was drawing it in the sand. He said, when up here, you get Egyptians. You get Egyptian people, Egypts he call them, Egyptals. And they black. They black as us before.
They were.
And over here, you go India. And you get the Tamil. And I never knew what Tamil was till someone told me. And you get the Tamil. And that's why our language, our ancient language, got Tamil words too. You ask why? Because we up there too. And then the other one go right over here, him go over America way, over there. Hawaii, are they black there? You go over there, and you go over there. And down here, you go down here. This bit of land here shifted all together down here. And this fella here, nah, he eat people. Down here. And this must have been New Zealand, right? And little tiny bit fall off. They stay good, they never get changed down there, and that was Tasmania.
Hey, yeah.
But, and I thought the 8 plates of the earth shifted in all directions, and I still don't know, I still don't know. But I was told that one day, something, I would be told to tell it. And here I am, 78, and I'm telling it. and it was told to me in the 80s, right?
So what we have here, Aunty Beve, is it begins here, doesn't it?
That's what they said.
That's what they're saying.
Up here past Gosford called Nararan, and it's called Narara now. And up the top of Mangrove Road are those beautiful carvings.
Yeah.
Now that is the Narara means the beginning place. Then they knew they had to perform ceremonies and what have you. These old people are telling me, and they're coming from Gove and Owen Pelly and Darwin. How would they know about down here? But they were told it was a story. And so the next place they went, they say Oranbar. And it was a rimba. There was the circles there where they did the corroborees, everything. And that's where the men and the women were initiated. They got their orange built, their hair built. And then, and it's sense. And then when they started to be too many, they started inbreeding with each other, and they've got I can draw you the thing, which I'm not going to do now, but it tells you how they knew that he showed me on the ground, this fella up here, this feather skin, this fella down here, now wait a minute, let me see, flower skin, this flower, this feather, this fish, this reptile. The flower will never marry the feather, and the fish will never marry the reptile. But the feather can marry the fish, the feather can marry the reptile, and the fish can marry the feather, and the fish can marry the flower, and the flower can marry the fish, and the flower can marry the reptile, but never can the flower marry the feather or the reptile marry the fish.
So that's your
and that's how they worked out there, so there were never any inbreeding.
The totems begin.
Yeah.
That's how it begins, the whole formation.
And you take your mother's totem, mother's skin, because you're born of her, and your father's totem. And we had a special Bartan law which said, and you probably know this, brother, my mother's brother is my other father, and all his children, and I won't say white man's word siblings, all his children are my brothers and sisters.
Yeah, that's right.
And my father's sister is my other mother, and all her children are my brothers and sisters. So why do you think we all call each other brother,
and
sister,
because
or cuz?
Yeah.
And that's the Bartan law. That's not just Darkinjung, that's all over.
And can I add something to close on this? I want to make one point. Aunty Bev spoke about the Tamil. Last year, Dr. Rao grabbed a group of people together and they did a scientific survey of mitochondrial DNA down at the bottom of India, the Tamil country. And what they found there, they did 930 people, what they call bush people, people who are still out there living traditionally. They found unique mitochondrial signatures, Australian Aboriginal signatures, with 7 of the people there, which really meant, for all intents and purposes, 7 of the people they surveyed, although living in India, were still full descent Aboriginal people. So that shows that link is still
Well, what
there.
they said was there are Tamil words which we use once we're initiated. We learn special words for water, for air, for food, and they're Tamil words, the ancient Aboriginal. And up at Barragara, the Devil Rock, the punishment area, Cohen came down and he told the law, and he told what the punishments were for breaking the skin law and that. And there's ancient Aboriginal language up there which looks like Egyptian glyphs. But they said it's ancient Aboriginal language.
Well, I'm going to make a point, I'm going to add something to that. That gives us another reason why the Egyptians came here. Not only did they come here for esoteric wisdom, which I knew they came here to learn that. They've also learned something new. They learned something else I didn't know they came to learn. This is where they learned their language and their glyphs. Really, they came here to become spiritualised and learn wisdom that they could not find anywhere else. As Aunty Bev said, this is where it begins, and that's why they came here. They knew that. They knew that. And we're going to stop now because we've just finished out of time. Thank you.